Hello and welcome to another episode of the Stalker Chain Archive. I know what you're thinking. Stalk, did you cut your hair? Because it looks amazing, and the answer is... I'm actually surprised you're asking me that, but... Yeah, I did cut my bangs, and they're kind of short, so just give me a couple weeks and they're gonna go back to normal, but that's not the point of the video. The point of today's video, I wanted to talk about the anime Shuffle. Was one that had kind of been on my watch list for a while, but I hadn't actually gone around to it until I'd noticed a couple of references in my favorite anime, or at least one of them, Lucky Star. I saw them recognize the anime and said, well, why not give it a try? So, thanks to that reference, I am here to present to you my experience with the anime and visual novel, Shuffle. Hi, I'm Stalker-chan, and just to preface, I do not have favoritism for visual novels just because they're older. Maybe you've looked at some Reddit posts or asked 4chan which to watch or play, and they've probably said the visual novel because older media is somehow better than its anime counterpart. Well, worry not. I'm not 40 years old or a Reddit or 4chan user, so you're in good hands. Also, this is your spoiler warning. I'm guessing that whoever's watching this has not indulged in Shuffle and is looking for which to at least start with, so we're gonna have multiple sections. One spoiler-free, and another with full spoilers, and another with full spoilers and my final thoughts. So let's get into it. Which is better, Shuffle the anime or the Eroge? Shuffle the visual novel came out in 2003 and the anime in 2005. I'm only going to discuss the main visual novel and anime series, so not including the spin-off visual novels or the character light novels. As for the main plot, basically, we start off in a world where humans, devils, and gods coexist with each other. The worlds of the gods and devils join with that of the humans, and they have made peace with each other, as well as other things. The Shuffle series focuses on the romantic adventures of the MC, Tsuchimirin, and his 5 potential maidens. Nadine, a devil, Sia, a god, Asa, a human, Kaede, a human, and Primula, a homunculus, or artificial life form. They all each have their own stories and quirks which are explored in the series. I bet you can't guess this, but Tsuchimirin is a really nice guy. He's so nice that 5 girls fall in love with him all at the same time. One day during class, 2 new students transfer and they happen to be Sia and Nadine. Along with them are their dads, the king of the gods and the king of the devils, respectively. Yes, that makes them princesses. So these 2 pretty girls transfer into Reen's class, and after their introductions walk right up to Reen and basically admit that they want to prove themselves worthy to him because they want to marry him. And I bet this is the part where you're wondering, what makes him so special? Well, 8 years ago, or something, Reen had met both Sia and Nadine on 2 separate occasions. Basically, he was nice to them, and they both fell in love with him at first sight. That's literally it. Present-day Sia is the cute and outgoing type, but has a bit of a short fuse, at least when it comes to her dad. Present-day Nadine is the calmer type, though she can be assertive when it comes to standing up for herself or Reen. Kaede and Asa have been classmates with Reen for a long time, and Kaede fulfills the childhood friend archetype, while Asa fulfills the older classmate archetype. Kaede and Reen grew up together, lived together, and have gotten very close over the years. During the events of the main story, Kaede's dad is out on a work trip, leaving Reen and Kaede alone for a few months. During this time, Kaede takes care of Reen to the best of her ability, such as doing all the housework, cooking, and cleaning. She pampers him so much that she doesn't even want him to go grocery shopping by himself or folding his own laundry. She's the responsible, quiet, and almost meek or submissive type, especially when witnessing the other girls flirting with Reen. She won't really stand up for her love for Reen, which I'd like to say is also part of her own self-hatred, which we will explore later. As for Asa, usually referred to as Asa-senpai, has kind of the older sister type personality, and by that I mean she's assertive and energetic and likes to tease Reen. She's also great at cooking and is well known at their school for being the leader of the cooking club. She taught Kaede how to cook as well as Nadine further along in the story, at least in the anime. Her and Reen are friends, and that's kinda it, at least for the start of the story. The last girl, Primula, is an artificial life form and is associated with the devils. Though she's not specifically related to anybody, Primula kind of acts as the little sister to Nadine. She's a kudere and fits the lolly or little sister archetype for the series. She's very cold and quiet, though she learns to open up as the series goes on. She really likes cats and often carries around an old cat plush. She's the last girl that Reen meets, and Compared to all the other introductions, she feels kind of detached from the other girls because she doesn't go to the same high school, at least in the beginning. So this marks the end of the basic rundown for each of the girls, which is pretty much everything that you need to understand by the end of the first episode. As for my verdict, I'm going to say that I really enjoyed the anime a lot more than the visual novel. This is mainly because the individual character stories were done really well in the anime, especially compared to the visual novel. The anime expanded on their stories way more, and to be honest, I was disappointed playing the visual novel because of how well they were done in the anime. It's not even worth playing for the special scenes because they were just really awful. It wasn't fun to watch at all because all of them were in pain, and just watch the anime, trust me. And this marks the end of the spoiler-free section, so from here on out, I'm going to discuss each character's full story as well as a more in-depth explanation on why I like the anime better than the visual novel. Sia. Sia's story surrounds her and her second personality. Sia was born from the king of the gods and a devil, making her a princess. She was originally supposed to have a sister who was not allowed to be born because she would have been born a devil. If this happened, it would have been really controversial in the world of the gods. Instead, Sia and her sister's personalities, or souls, had formed in one body, which was Sia's. Her sister's personality had to stay dormant, or in the backseat, watching Sia living her life while being forced to stay unknown to others. This second personality, sometimes referred to as Reverse Sia, confront and control Sia's body during certain situations, like when their emotions are heightened. Reverse Sia's personality is a lot more bold and assertive compared to Sia. After Sia transfers into Reed's high school, they become casual friends as she tries to gain his affection. After a while without movement within the relationship, Reverse Sia makes a few appearances, scolding Sia and trying to encourage her to actually go after Reed. These moments of Reverse Sia popping in are very interesting in the anime because, for a while, they go unexplained. Over the course of a few short moments throughout the anime, we can see Sia's facial expressions change in a really ominous way. Most of these appearances happen when Sia is alone in her room, usually in the dark. Sia and Reverse Sia eventually start having conversations and arguing with each other, though when you watch it for the first time, you don't really know what's going on. One day, Reverse Sia takes over and skips school with Reed to go on a date. He noticed the drastic personality change, which is when her existence was revealed to the viewer. The climax of her story in the anime was very different from in the visual novel, mainly because in the anime, Reed doesn't end up picking her. Her ending in the anime felt almost half-assed or underwhelming. Basically, after Reverse Sia makes a few appearances and causes trouble and basically says, "Nobody knows about me and I'm sad," Sia finally tells Reed what's going on. Apparently, Reverse Sia gave her the motivation to go after Reed, and she also confesses her love for him in this scene, though he doesn't accept her feelings. It's just very obvious that they had to go with this outcome because, ultimately, Sia wasn't the girl that they decided to pick and they didn't want to put too much of a spotlight on her. As for the visual novel, at the climax of her story, Sia decides to allow Reverse Sia to take over her body forever so that she could finally try to live a normal life. Though it wasn't that simple. Sia's friend's personality and body couldn't just be transferred to Reverse Sia because they're entirely different people and therefore would not experience life in the exact same way. Reverse Sia explains to Reed how hard it was for her to grow up and exist being ignored by everybody, not even having a name, and not being able to adapt into Sia's life. So to remedy this, Reed names her Kikyo. Kikyo and Sia then made the agreement to live life together along with Reed instead of one way or the other. I think that her story in the anime was paced very well. There were some short clips every episode or so where Kikyo would come in but you wouldn't know that it's her yet, which created a very ominous air around her. The fighting between Sia and Kikyo were also done really well in the anime, but I think that the story was better in the visual novel, so I guess that's 1 point for the VN. Nerine. As for Nerine, there's something I need to explain to you about her story, which is also relevant for a handful of other characters in the series, and that is Project Yggdrasil. Project Yggdrasil was an experimental project conducted by the gods and the devils, which aimed to create a superior magical being. Throughout the project, there were 3 experimental subjects. One of them was a clone of Nerine as a child, named Lycoris. Even though they were the same in every way except eye color and singing voice, they had grown to be friends. Lycoris had remained in the experimental side with the other test subject, Primula, which is a homunculus like mentioned before. Lycoris, Primula, and Nerine had all spent time together at the testing site, and even became close friends. One day, Nerine had contracted an incurable illness, which Lycoris volunteered to sacrifice herself and her spirit in order to save her. As a result, Netine absorbed all of Lycodis's emotions and memories, even her singing voice. Remember when I told you that Sia and Netine met Rin when they were children? Who Rin actually met was Sia and Lycodis, Netine's clone. When Netine absorbed all of her memories, that included feelings and memories for Rin. And so Netine decided to pursue Rin in order to fulfill those feelings for Lycodis. So again, I like the story much better in the anime than the visual novel, mainly because we could actually witness these events instead of reading about them through a text box. Lycodis meeting and befriending Rin and then going back to the test site, telling Netine and Primula about their adventures and time in the human world. Another thing that I liked much more about the anime was Lycodis' singing voice. Just reading that somebody is singing a song is not the same as actually hearing somebody sing a song. Of course, because the story takes place after Netine was healed, we mostly witness her singing and making references to Lycodis. At the very beginning of the story, Rin meets Netine at a playground. This was also the day before she transferred into a school. He notices her singing and decides to stay to listen. The scenes in the anime and visual novel are very different from each other. I'll actually show you a short clip from each, and you can decide for yourself which you like better.
一つ一つ思い出してみればなぜか
I'd have to say that I like the anime version better because you can actually hear her singing versus just hearing the melody. So for me, that's 1 point in favor of the anime. Primula. Also significant to Project Idrasil is one of my favorite girls, Primula. Basically, at the start of the story, Rin finds Primula alone in an arcade and is then introduced to her by Netine and her dad, the King of the Devils. It turns out that Primula had been trying to find Rin and wanted to stay with him after hearing so much about him from Lycodis. The King of the Devils was open to the idea because he wanted Primula, as an artificial life form, to learn how to feel and experience emotions to keep her magical abilities in check. Remember that she was a result of Project Idrasil, which the whole goal was to create a superior magical being in which they were successful. She was entirely created from scratch, built from the molecular level, at least according to the King of the Gods and the Devils.
Yeah!
She was also contained in the experimental site with Netine and Lycodis, forming a very close relationship with Lycodis in the time that they spent together. Primula's stories and character arc are very different in the anime and the visual novel, to the point where I was actually shocked reading the visual novel because of how much they decided to change, and for mostly good reason. So, this next part is from the visual novel, and I don't remember all of the details, but during the Project Idrasil days, Primula had gotten lost in the human world one day, eventually being found and recovered by Lycodis. After Lycodis was absorbed by Netine, Primula was distraught, being left with only her old cat plushie. She became motivated to find Rin because of how much she had heard about him from Lycodis. During her route in the visual novel, Primula goes missing, but is eventually found by Rin in the park. It turns out that she had been in the park waiting for Lycodis to find her again like the last time. But when Rin finds her instead, she has to finally acknowledge and accept that Lycodis is gone, which was very hard for her. So Primula again is probably my favorite girl in the whole series. She didn't actually have too much screen time in the anime except for her main events and one that was created for the anime. But the second half of her route in the visual novel was very awesome and special for me to play through. So after Rin finds her, he offers himself as kind of a replacement, basically showing Primula that he was there for her like Lycodis was. This kicks off the second half of her visual novel route, and in my experience, the best part of the whole thing. Once Primula accepts Rin as, and I'm sorry for this, but her older brother, her personality starts to flourish. She becomes much more happy and reactive instead of her previous numb state. It felt so special finally seeing her happy like that, especially after watching her be so cold and numb in the anime. She also had lots of adorable moments, and for that reason I would play the visual novel all over again, except for the main story parts. The climax of her story in the visual novel felt kind of random to me. Basically, she erased Rin's memory of her. I don't really remember why, but it was like he remembered her anyway when he was walking past her, and I don't really know. But everything before that was really great. As for her story in the anime, things are very different. After she starts living with Rin and Kaede, her emotions don't improve much and she begins to have a harder time holding back her magic. She's taken back to the Project Idrasil site by the King of the Gods and the Devils to attempt to restabilize her, but things go wrong. They end up breaking the news that Primula's state is so rough that she could end up dying within the next few days. So Rin and the girls, including Netine, decide to go to the project site to try and get her back, It's this whole cool test tube sci-fi thing which wasn't in the visual novel at all, and we were able to watch as Rin and Nadine try to call for Primula to give her strength. We also end up seeing an appearance from Liquidus pushed through within Nadine, which also causes a chain of events where Nadine decides to live life through her own emotions for Rin instead of trying to fulfill the feelings that Liquidus once had before she essentially died. But yeah, if you like Primula, I strongly recommend playing the visual novel for her after watching the anime. And I think her story in the visual novel was the only one that I really liked, so that's 1 point for the Eroge. Kaede. Moving on to the next character, Kaede. Kaede is Rin's childhood friend and takes care of him as a way to make up for the previous conflicts. When they were both children, Rin's parents and Kaede's mom died while coming home from a trip. They were obviously really shocked and distraught. Rin noticed that Kaede became extremely depressed, practically rejecting life, and in order to give her a reason to live, he decided to tell her that their parents' deaths were his fault. Rin's thought process was that Kaede's hate for him could motivate her to live. He decided to tell her that he called their parents to ask them to come home early, and because of this, he had caused the car crash. Kaede believed this and became extremely upset towards Rin, which was exactly what he set out to do. Every interaction they had in their childhood during this period was negative and chaotic because of this, and even at one point, Kaede had told him, "I wish you would just die." Eventually, though, Kaede realized that neither she nor Rin was to blame for the deaths, and every day since then she had tried her best to make up with Rin for her past actions. Pretty much everybody around Rin and Kaede, like at their school, expected them to become a couple because of this new dynamic. Kaede does everything she can to take care of Rin, and he has learned to rely on her. In the visual novel, when you play Kaede's route, it seems pretty self-explanatory, though at the story's climax, Kaede begs Rin not to love her because she feels as though she doesn't deserve it after practically torturing Rin their whole childhood, but they're still able to begin a healthy relationship. It was really endearing for her because I really liked her character since the first episode of the anime. She has a really cute and soft personality on the outside, yet a dark past and lots of inner conflict. We'll get back to her in a second since she has another conflicting story with one of the other girls, Asa. Asa Shigure is an upperclassman and casual friend of Rin. Going back to Project Idrasil, Asa's mother was the last experimental subject who was genetically modified to have enhanced magical abilities. She suddenly disappeared during the experiments and was thought to have died, but in reality she began her own life in the human world. Asa's mother fell in love with a human and they had a child, creating something entirely new. Throughout Asa's entire life, she had been weak and sick with seemingly no reason or ailment, and it had caused a lot of pain for her. There was even a time as a kid where she lashed out at her mother for creating her because of how much pain she had suffered. So in the anime, Rin ends up choosing Asa, and the extra bits of the story were much better than the visual novel. In maybe the last 10 episodes or so, all of the other girls sort of accept that Rin likes Asa, so they set up this whole date for them, and it's this really eventful, silly episode or two. It also led up to a very, very suspenseful few episodes which were done really well. The anime takes everything from the visual novel and just bumps it up to 100. In the last 5 to 10 episodes, it's kind of guaranteed and known by all the other characters that Rin is picking Asa. Kaede takes this extremely hard in the anime, which is really haunting and also awesome to watch. Over the time that Asa and Rin get closer together, he ended up spending less time at the house. Kaede would make dinner for Rin that would sit out for hours, only eventually to be called by him, letting her know that he was staying with Asa for dinner. There was even an instance where she waited all night for him to come back. She was growing increasingly more stressed and upset that Rin wasn't spending time with her anymore because all she wanted to do in life was to take care of him, and she felt as though Asa was taking that away from her. Insanity ensues, and there are a few very creepy but also awesome scenes where Kaede just loses it. Finally, Rin and Asa show up one day and Kaede lets her feelings be known. She gets into an argument with Asa, or I guess just starts yelling at her, and finally says, "I wish you would just die." If this sounds familiar, it should be. It's also the same thing that she said to Rin when they were kids, which just perfectly illustrates her extremely dark mental state beneath the surface. Now I have to say, this part was not at all in the visual novel, which was really disappointing to play through. What was both in the anime and visual novel, however, was what happened next. Kaede begs Asa to continue to let her love Rin even though they're together. In the anime, after all that build-up, it's extremely crushing watching this exchange, and I felt so hard for Kaede. It was so well done in the anime, and that's what honestly made me love Kaede so much, was the yandere-like story arc, even though it only fizzled down to an "I hope you die." But considering what happened in the visual novel, she couldn't have done much more than that. After all, this isn't school days. Also, here's a quick self-harm and suicide warning. If you're not comfortable with hearing those topics, you can skip to the timestamp on the screen. So back to Asa's illness. We learn that it's caused by the magic inherited from her mom. Asa was born a human, and combined with the powerful magic in her body, she became very weak. Essentially, the vessel she was born in couldn't handle all the power that she was given. So Asa ends up in the hospital because she starts to get worse and worse. Even though Asa knows that the only way to cure her illness would be to use her magic, she refuses to do so. Her reasoning stems from when she lashed out at her mom when she was a kid because of the magic she obtained from her. She continues to refuse, hating the topic of magic and never wanting to use it to spare pain for her mother. In retaliation, Rin decides that the only way she can get her to use her magic is to put himself in danger. Listen, the way that they portray this sequence of events is very different in the anime than the visual novel. In the anime, they space it out very well, spending time in and out of the hospital and even a little bit of foreshadowing. In the anime, while Asa and Rin were on the date, the last place that they went to was an overlook where Rin confessed to her. She had also talked about returning to that place when they grew old together. Much later, when Rin went to visit Asa in the hospital, he discovered that she was gone and ended up finding her at that exact overlook. That was where Rin proposed the ultimatum. Earlier at the hospital, Rin had obtained a box cutter from a nurse to help him open something, though he never ended up giving it back. It was so haunting watching him pull it out, or occasionally noticing that it was still in his pocket. When confronting Asa at the overlook, he took out the box cutter and cut his wrist. Either he dies in that very moment, or Asa uses her magic to save both him and herself. His plan ended up succeeding, and Asa finally gave in to using her magic, and they were both safe.
Asa 先輩。
ちゃんダメすぐに手当てをバカ
So now that we have the entire story out of the way, it's time to make some final examinations. The anime added so much more to the story, some great, some not, than the visual novel. Overall, the anime was a much better experience being able to watch the backstories versus just reading about them over a black screen. For example, there was one part that I was specifically bummed about in the visual novel, which was when Rin was going over the story of him and Kaede. There was one part where he says, "She even dropped a knife on me once," which was so underwhelming compared to how it was portrayed in the anime.
落としちゃった。拾って。拾って。
It hits way harder watching these scenes being animated, and on top of that, they expanded the stories very well, creating these perfectly paced stories that led up to a crazy finish. This also applies to the final scene in Asa's route where Rin proposes the ultimatum. In the visual novel, he says something like, "I went by a craft store and bought this knife," versus in the anime when he borrows it from the nurse. Those final quiet moments in the hospital when Rin and Asa are kind of at their limits, with the references going back to the box cutter in his pocket again and again, left me on the edge of my seat. Even the smaller anecdotes and some mini-stories being animated added a lot to the viewing experience, like Sia and Rin getting lost at the beach, Nerine making a ton of omelets, Asa working at a cafe with Kaede for a day, and Asa teaching Kaede how to cook. The only part I was really disappointed about was how they handled Primula. The first half of her story was pretty good, and even though I think the climax of her story in the anime was better than the visual novel, they pretty much left out all of her cute moments until like 2 minutes of the final episode. I remember watching it and being like, where was this the rest of the time? So the visual novel was worth it for her, but as for everything else, the anime beats it by a mile. Not to mention that even though you do get to pick who you want to bang in the visual novels, and I did play through all of the routes and the scenes, they really were not worth the time. Whoever wrote them is really obsessed with virginity, and I'm not sure if this is a common thing in eroges, but they all bled. Like, yes, they bled when you stick it in. Every time, all of the girls. And it wasn't really fun to look at or hear, and as a non-weenie wielder myself, they were really hard to watch. Not to mention that Rean is selfish in almost every scene, if you know what I mean. However, I did like that you could pick whether to end the scene in or outside. So the main reason that I decided to make this video was because of a few conversations that I both had and read. I noticed that most people have been told or tell others to play the visual novel instead of watching the anime, and I strongly disagree. Some people's reasoning for this is that each character has a satisfying ending, and while that might be the case depending on the player, their stories were just kind of boring. I wanted to play the visual novel after watching the anime, but to be honest, I don't think I'd watch the anime after playing the visual novel. Though I do recommend it after watching the anime if you have a favorite girl and want to experience some romance. But hey, you don't have to take my advice, you can do whatever you want. So as for my final answer, the anime is much better than the visual novel, and if you're planning on watching or playing either of those, I guess I'm sorry I spoiled it for you. Anyways, thank you so much for watching to the end of this episode, and if you would like for me to review another anime or visual novel combo, just let me know in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode of the Stalker Chain Archive.